Country.
Madam Speaker, last Thursday, the Prime Minister flip-flopped on his NDP Liberal carbon tax scheme. He's giving a tax pause to select people for select types of home heating. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. With winter just around the corner, every Canadian deserves tax relief on their home heating, including in places like Sault Ste. Marie. On Monday's vote, can that member have the freedom to vote for our Conservative common sense plan to take the tax off all forms of home heating for those in Sault Ste. Marie and for all Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Fighting climate change while helping families with their affordability challenges is a dual priority, and a serious plan needs to have both. Our government is standing up to take action on the environment in a way that directly helps Canadians, and the recent changes are about home heating oil, the dirtiest way to heat one's home. And as a rural member of Parliament, a lot of my neighbours use home heating oil, and I want to help them get off of that. And this plan does just that. There are more people that use home heating oil in the province of Ontario than there are in Nova Scotia. This is a pan-Canadian solution to getting off home heating oil, just like we're trying to get off coal. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Country.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister has created two classes of Canadians, those that pay carbon tax and those that don't. And I'm sure the member for Sault Ste. Marie has been hearing the same thing from his residents as I have from mine. People are struggling to afford to keep the heat on when the temperatures go down. They don't understand why they're being punished for using clean natural gas. So again, on Monday, will the member for Sault Ste. Marie vote with his Liberal government's costly, unfair tax on home heating, or will he stand with the Conservative motion to take the tax off and keep the heat on for residents of Sault Ste. Marie and for all Canadians?
Great question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think it's important to point out, since the question came from a member from British Columbia, that British Columbia doesn't have a federal carbon tax. They use their own, and they're actually a leading province on fighting climate change. Conservatives keep claiming that pollution pricing is driving up inflation, Madam Speaker, and that is just false. This is about moving away from the dirtiest way to heat a home, the least healthy way to heat a home, and lowering emissions at the same time, Madam Speaker. You know, it would be great that if in this place we discussed not whether we should fight climate change, but how we fight climate change. It would be great to hear from the Conservatives if they have a plan.
Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, they finally admitted that their carbon tax is making it harder for Canadians to afford to heat their homes. The Liberals have said that only people who elect Liberals will get a break. To folks who can't afford to eat, heat or house themselves, this Prime Minister just isn't worth the cost. 7 of 8 members of Parliament in the City of Ottawa are Liberals, but the common sense for MP for Carleton will give them all a chance to take the tax off so Ottawans can keep the heat on. Will the Liberal members for Ottawa vote for our common sense plan to take the carbon tax off home heating bills for everyone in Ottawa and Eastern Ontario?
That's right. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All of the Conservatives, including that member, ran on a platform that included a plan to price carbon. They also ran on a plan with a clean fuel standard almost identical to what was proposed by our government. Now, that member has many constituents that use home heating oil, and that's bad for our air quality. It raises emissions. It's the dirtiest and the most expensive way to heat one's home, and we are providing free heat pumps for any Canadian whose province wants to work with our government to get them off of home heating oil.
I just want to say it's quite disrespectful when a member is standing up answering a question and others are having conversations across the way. So again, I want to remind members that if they don't want to take part in question period and be respectful, they should maybe step out and have those conversations together somewhere else. The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
What's clear is that this is a tax plan, not an environmental plan. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, the Liberals told Canadians that if they wanted a break from the carbon tax, that they had to vote Liberal. Ottawa has 7 Liberal MPs. Glengarry Prescott Russell has a Liberal MP. Kingston and the Islands has a Liberal MP. But with all of these Liberals, why don't the residents of Eastern Ontario and Ottawa get a break from the carbon tax? Will any of these Liberal MPs, the member for Kingston and the Islands, stand up right now and say that they will vote to scrap the tax on home heating?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Madam Speaker. Now, my friend and colleague from Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes, Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes, knows that he ran on a platform to price carbon in the last election. He promised his constituents that he cared about climate change. As I said before, it would be great that if in this House we could spend some time debating how we fight climate change, not if we fight climate change, Madam Speaker. Look, this is not only hypocritical of the Conservatives, it shows that they cannot be trusted. Their plans are risky. If they had a plan, it would be risky. It's irresponsible and reckless, Madam Speaker.
Absolutely. L'honorable député de Bellechasse, Les Échemins-Lévis.
The honourable member for Bellechasse, Les Échemins-Lévis. Thank you, Madam Speaker. After 8 years, this government is making Quebecers poorer. The second carbon tax does apply to Quebec, up to 20 cents per litre of gas. And that's not my opinion. It's the parliamentary budget officer who said so. And that's not enough for the Bloc Québécois. It wants to radically increase the carbon tax. Voting for the Bloc Québécois is a steep price. We have a Conservative motion asking for the carbon tax to be scrapped for everyone. Will the Liberals support this common sense motion to scrap the carbon tax on all forms of heating for all Canadians? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. Madam Speaker, it's really stretching the truth here and not saying something quite right. Because the member who just spoke was at the National Assembly of Quebec when they priced pollution. Quebec was a real leader, global leader, when it did that. And now here, this member gets up in the House and says that she doesn't believe in the carbon tax. I think she should speak to the leader of the opposition and tell him that this is not a way to support Canadians, Quebecers, or the environment. The honourable member for Bellechasse-Lévis. Madam Speaker, after 8 years in power, this government is panicking. The Prime Minister announced a pause on the carbon tax for the Atlantic region. That's not enough. We are asking him to be fair to all Canadians, including Quebecers. Despite what the Bloc Québécois says, the second carbon tax will apply to Quebec. There is a real cost to voting for the Bloc because they want to radically increase the tax. I would like to remind you that, Madam Speaker. Will the Prime Minister ignore the demands of the Bloc Québécois and vote for our motion to help Quebecers? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, my honourable colleague doesn't seem to have understood my answer. When she was part of the government in the National Assembly of Quebec, she supported a price on carbon. Quebec, both in the past and today, was a leader in the fight against climate change. I don't understand how my colleague can rise today and say that a price on pollution is not one of the best solutions for climate change. I would strongly encourage her and other Conservatives to speak to their leader to ensure that he understands that pricing pollution is important for Quebecers and Canadians throughout the country.
The member opposite isn't even listening to what British Columbians are saying. 72% of people in my province say that the carbon tax is both ineffective and unfair, and even the NDP Premier is now calling for carbon tax fairness. Now, the member for Cloverdale-Langley City has a choice to make on Monday. Will he vote for the Liberal plan of different taxation for different people depending where they live? Or will he vote yes for the common sense Conservative plan to take the tax off, to keep the heat on for all Canadians, all members of Cloverdale-Langley City?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Madam Speaker, my honourable colleague knows that British Columbia, as a leader in climate change, has been working hard for decades now, almost decades now, on its own price on carbon. The plan that we have put forward, Madam Speaker, will benefit thousands and thousands of British Columbians who continue to use home heating oil. They will be able to take advantage of what we have put in place. And in addition, working with the Premier of British Columbia, who has already said he is going to work with us to ensure that those British Columbians that cannot have access to heat pumps will be...
I'm sorry, somehow the honourable member could... the light went off, the microphone went off, so I will allow him to finish up the end of his...
Madam Speaker, simply put, what we have put in place will help British Columbians, the thousands of British Columbians who continue to use home heating oil. It will help them move to heat pumps, and the Premier of British Columbia has announced that he will work with us, and that is how we continue the fight against climate change, working together, not by opposing every single measure as the Conservatives do.